probably have to come back to my great great grandfather Peter Straub, and I would just love for him to come to our campus and just look around and talk about where we are and how do we get there and how does that line up with what he was thinking 153 years ago.
I'd love to see him try a seltzer or one of these ciders that people are drinking nowadays just to see what he was like. What is this thing? What is this
What
bubbly
is this
water you're giving
crunchy
me?
water?
Welcome back to Shelf Confidence, a podcast brought to you by the Pennsylvania Food Merchants Association. Today, I'm pouring a glass and diving into one of Pennsylvania's oldest and most storied breweries. Our guest is William Brock, President and CEO of Straub Brewery. Based in St. Mary's, Straub has been a family-owned and independently operated brewery since 1872, making it one of the longest-running breweries in the country. We'll talk to Bill about the brewery's legacy, how it keeps its identity growing through the generations, and what it takes to stay relevant in today's competitive craft beer market. We'll also explore broader trends in Pennsylvania brewing, including local sourcing, community connections, and the future of independent beer. Let's get into it. Thank you so much for being on the
Right.
show today. How are you doing?
Doing very well. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Very excited to talk with you about beer today. Been looking forward to this for a couple of days. We're going to have a little fun here. So I'm going to dive right in and just I'd love to know the history of your brewery, where it comes from, a little of the background on what you guys do.
Yeah. Okay. Well, as you said, we've been around a long time, 153 years, and the brewery was founded, I guess you could say, by Peter Straub, my great great grandfather. He came over from Germany in the late 1860s, ended up in brewing in Pittsburgh and Brookville, various areas, but eventually ended up in St. Mary's and went to work for a man called Sorg's Brewery. So it was Francis Sorg. He hired him as the brewmaster and the business manager. And by 1875, he fell in love with Sabina Sorg, Francis's daughter. They got married, and in 1878, he bought the brewery. So our namesake starts in 1872, but that was really when he came to St. Mary's and started brewing. And he and Sabina had a lot of children. They had 11. One passed away. Five of them ended up at the brewery. One became a priest down in St. Vincent, and they brought it up through until Prohibition, when, of course, everything had to supposedly stop. That's a bit of a mystery that only recently we've really started talking about. And then they got it back up and going after Prohibition, put in a can line in the 50s, and slowly, one step after the other, it involved my great grandfather, my great great grandfather, my great grandfather Joe. My grandfather was a treasurer here for years, which was kind of acting like the CFO. And then my mom was chair of the board for years. And then I had left St. Mary's for 25 years. I had spent time in Alaska and different parts
Hmm.
of the country. Ended up in Lewisburg, and took them about 5 years to talk me into coming here, because it's a great business, but when you're dealing with family and
Hmm.
complexities and cousins and parents, it was a so it took a while to convince me to come here, but I eventually did in 2008, and I've been at it ever since.
That's amazing. Now, that's a lot of history crammed into a little story there. I
Yeah,
love
well,
that.
I could really go off, but we only have so much time. But
Ah,
yeah, it is a fascinating history, because our our perspective is over a century. So when people ask you what was the most challenging time in the brewery's history, it's probably Prohibition. I mean, and that's a very different perspective when you're looking at your business and your business model. So it's we've seen good times, we've seen bad times, we've seen times where we had to shut down. I mean, it changes the way you look at the business.
no, I imagine. I was definitely going to ask you about that. Like, what did you guys do during Prohibition? I imagine this was a common problem for a lot of breweries, but some went
Yeah.
underground, some didn't. I'm curious, what did you guys do?
I'm, the public stores, they had farms, they made ice cream, they did a bunch of different things. They did whatever they needed to do
Sure.
to survive. They made near beer. They probably made beer. But it's interesting, because when you think about your livelihood, your father's livelihood was making beer, and then all of a sudden around 1919, the a constitutional amendment is
Yeah.
passed prohibiting you from making beer. I mean, it must have been kind of overwhelming. I mean, just almost dumbfounding. Um,
Yeah.
but I think if they made beer, they weren't the gangster types. They probably handed it off to somebody else, and let them do all that other kind of stuff. But they would have had to have made it. I mean, it's inconceivable that they wouldn't have. And I'm sure it's probably the same story with any other brewery that was alive at that time.
I'm sure. And you kind of touched on this also, is that you're a family-run operation and have been since the
We
jump
are.
here. I'd
Yes.
love to know a little bit more about how you manage that, the legacy of that. I mean, I'm sure there's some good stories there too.
Yeah. There are a lot of good stories. Um, I don't know. I think when I came on, I decided that, I'm not going to be one of the owners. I'm going to be an employee. I think that's the only way you can really
Yeah,
successfully run a family business because the original owners get to do whatever they want, whether that was good for business or not. But when it starts to, the ownership spreads out, I mean, I think you're almost obligated to run it like a business. And I think it's, managing family, managing customers, it just all takes kind of the same skill and diplomacy. I mean, it doesn't um the difference with family is you have history and it goes way back, but it's you just have to have good boundaries, try to do the right thing, try to understand what people's needs are, and you just try to satisfy them if you can.
I'm always impressed by that. Like, obviously, we're Pennsylvania Food Merchants Association. We deal with a lot
Right,
of grocery stores and chains and stuff, and a lot of them are also family run. I'm finding, and
right.
I'm truly impressed by that. Like
Yeah.
that has got to make for some interesting Thanksgiving dinners that I'm
Well,
sure. So,
well, yes, the beer flows, but it's also it's a commitment to something bigger
yeah,
than yourself, right?
true,
So, I mean, my job was to manage this place. I inherited something, so it wasn't my money that started. It wasn't,
sure.
there's still great risk involved. My job is to make sure it's a better place when I leave than when I got here. But when you're talking about a legacy company, I'm holding the keys for the next person. I mean, this is not something that we're going to sell it or do something. You're just getting ready to hand it to the next person, and then it'll be their job to be the steward and do the right thing and take care of it. And your decision making is different when you're in it for the long term like that. You just have to come at it from a slightly different angle.
No, I totally get that. Yeah, you stole the word I was going to say. That stewardship came to mind,
Right,
and
right,
yeah, because it's a link in a chain, right? Like the goal of
right.
this,
It's
I
a
would imagine, I'm not going to
historical,
speak for you, but like I would imagine is to
right.
continue this for another several, many, if not more generations. I would
Well,
hope, right?
yeah, you hope. I mean, it's like you're running a business, but you're also taking care of a museum in a lot of ways. You're taking care of a
Legacy.
piece of history that it really means as much to non-family members in some cases as it does to us. I mean, people don't drink the beer because of Bill Brock. I try to keep a very, very low profile. They drink our beer while they're living their life. And,
Yeah.
it's at their family reunions. And so some ways there's attachments out there that go far beyond the family. And you really got to understand that. And so you're kind of taking care of it for them too.
I'm sure more than a few people are drinking it because of you. I'm sure it's a little bit of a
well,
factor. I'm sure it's in
well,
there a little bit, but
I sometimes I give away free beer. So it's,
that'll do it.
but again, I guess what I meant by that is it's the relationship with your customers and an institution like this has been around for so long. It means a lot to a lot of people in the family
Absolutely.
and out. And that's kind of that's a good thing.
It is. I like how you describe that. You're holding on to a museum a little bit and being such an old brewery. Yeah. I mean, you guys have that
Yeah.
famous tap that's been going on forever and ever,
Yeah,
right?
our eternal tap. Yeah, it's we uh we were going to get some t-shirts for people that when they every once in a while it'll kick. So you can say I kicked the eternal tap. But yeah, that's it. I think it was it I would imagine there's no clear history where it came from, but I would imagine in the day, they probably always kept a keg of beer on tap at the brewery, and
Why
it's
not?
probably what they drank with lunch, and friends
Yeah.
would come by and they'd have a beer, and over time it evolved to this section, and it's a part of the brewery. I can look out a window right now and look and see who's down there, and it's you come in, you can have a couple glasses of beer on us. You used to before COVID, you would have to wash your own glass when you were done, and yeah, it's a really neat hospitality kind of thing. People come from all over. We have a map down there where people will put a sticker on where
Hmm,
they came from.
I like
And it's
that.
interesting because sometimes you'll have a husband and wife come in, and the husband's like just has been talking up this eternal tap forever, and the wife comes in and she's like, "Is that it?" and then other times you have people come in and they just want to drink right out of the tap. It's kind of funny in a lot of ways. But in all the years I've been here, I've only ever had to ask two people to leave. So it's
Okay,
kind of
that's
a
pretty good.
yeah, it is really good. It really good, and it's a testament, I think, to I think some people. It's kind of like a compact. They go to our drive-through, buy a couple cases of beer, and then
Mhm.
in exchange for that, they get a couple beers on us. So
Okay.
people were worried when we opened our tap room. whether or not we keep the eternal tap open. And my response was, it would cause mayhem if I tried to close it. So definitely keep it open. And I suppose there's people that have been to the eternal tap that have never been to the tap room. But
Hmm.
it's full a lot of days. We have tours, free tours. And I think it's just, it's symbolic of good hospitality, thanking your customers,
Yeah.
and there's a group that comes in every Friday afternoon. And in fact, one of them, a good friend of mine, had convinced his employer that he was on the board of Straub and he had to be up there every Friday at 3 o'clock. And he would come up to the tap,
I
and
like that.
so it kind of became a joke,
Got to
but
make him a
yeah, it's
t-shirt.
again, it's a sign of the loyalty. And thank God for loyalty.
Absolutely. No, that's awesome. No, I like that story. That's cool. So, for the listeners who may not be familiar, how would you describe Straub's signature style or philosophy when it comes to brewing?
Well, I think it's pretty straightforward. I mean, we're traditional. We're all about legacy. We're all about heritage, and that doesn't mean that we want to shun any kind of technology. But in a way, it's kind of our point of difference.
Hmm.
We still brew in a gravity-fed brewery. It's when we say handcrafted, it really what
Not
that means
kidding.
is that our brewers do it. We don't have any computers. They they put the corn in, the malt, the hops. They drop it to the cellar, and so the handcrafted nature of it, kind of makes it artesian almost. And it's so you might have a little bit of variation in batches, and you will because it is handcrafted, but that's kind of unique. That's something that they're not hitting a computer switch and doing all these other things. They're really brewing the beer. And they test it up there. And if you take the tour, and we do a really good hands-on tour, you got to go up. I don't know, there's probably 14 different levels in the brewery because it's built on the side of a hill, but you get to see, we use modern equipment when it helps with the quality of the beer, and if it makes a dramatic improvement. But we don't just run to technology for the sake of technology. Anything we can hang on to, we really try to, because I think that's kind of cool. That's kind of what
Yeah.
makes us Straub. So it's a lot of innovation. I mean, when you're dealing with an old brewery, you're innovating every day, trying to figure it out. And but we got great brewers. They understand what they're doing, and they continue to surprise me all the
No, I
time.
think
So it's
no, that's awesome. That's legacy. That's the
yeah.
brand. That's
Right, right. I
better
mean,
beer.
if we started a new brewery, we would probably be in an industrial park, one floor,
Probably.
metal building, and I get it. That's what you got to do, and actually it'd be a lot easier to brew. Um, but then we're like everybody else. We're
Yeah.
not strapped. So
No, that's nice. So, we talked about the eternal tap, but I'm curious. So, if you're designing the perfect beer fridge, how would you do it? What's in it? Obviously, there's gonna be straw beer, but
yeah.
what's in there? What do you think?
Well, I'd probably have a few yards in there because they're good friends. Um, Damien makes a good beer out at Old Forge in Danville. Um, I'd probably have a glass chilling for a little bit of scotch if I was in the right mood. Um,
Mm,
yeah, I mean, there's so many good beers in Pennsylvania. I mean, so many, and there's it's 400 breweries, but it's a small fraternity, and we make great beers. So I'd probably have to have a very large fridge if I was going to put a beer in there for everybody that I like and respect. But yeah, I mean, I think that it's some of Yard's sour beers are just phenomenal. I mean, Tom Keogh just does amazing stuff, so yeah, but it would probably be rotating too.
no, I like. They got to change the flavors out. I totally
Yeah,
get that.
all the time.
But you kind of touched on this a little bit. That Pennsylvania does have this rich brewing tradition, and
Yeah.
obviously Pennsylvania is an older state. Maybe that's a factor. But I'd love to know about like, what are the what causes that? Like, what is it about Pennsylvania that creates this unique brewing culture? And why do we
Yeah,
do
I
this?
I think it was, a lot of it had to be because we've always had breweries in Pennsylvania. You've had Yingling down there. You've had Kohler. I mean, we've always had a rich brewing culture. I think previous to the craft movement, they were all pretty large breweries.
Yeah.
Straub, I think when we were down to 83 breweries in the country, I think we were the second or third smallest.
Hmm.
Now, compared to the micro brews, we're pretty big. But I think that culture was always there. I think we're definitely a manufacturing state. And I
Yeah.
think, a lot of that tradition came from, after work, what are you going to do? You're going to have a beer. And then I think it revived just because you had a few guys like the Trogner brothers that started it, and Tom, and you had places in Pittsburgh, and I think the culture was always there. And I don't know if that's because we're German, but we always knew we had breweries in Pennsylvania. So I have to think that that's one of the reasons. I don't know. And breweries are cool. I mean, it's
I
they're not
agree.
always fun to they're not always fun to manage, but they're it's kind of a cool thing to have, to make beer, to have that whole beer culture. And so I think that has to be part of it. Has to be part of it.
Standing on the shoulders of beer giants, I'd imagine. Yeah,
Yeah, but now you look at it, I mean, there's just some really innovative brewing going on. I mean, just, there probably too much, which is unfortunate, but some really, really neat operations, neat tap rooms, good ideas and flavor profiles. I don't know where they go next. I mean, I think we probably have almost maxed it, but you never say never. Never say
never say
never.
never. I'm curious as well. You kind of touched on innovation here, and being such an older brewery yourself, you kind of touched on this already a little bit. But I'm curious, like, how do you balance that between, doing it in the traditional way, but also innovating and staying current and all that? How do you do that?
Well, a lot of trial and error. I mean, we used to have a scratch system, but we brew in a 150 barrel tank.
Okay.
And we learned over the years that, Vince, the brewmaster, can get that down as low as 50. So we
Okay.
were going to, branch out and buy all new equipment, but we're like, we don't have to. Um, we're primarily a lager brewery. I mean, the Straub American lager, we inherited that. It's a great beer, but it's probably one of the most unforgiving beers you can make because, one little mistake and it just jumps out at you and smacks you. So I think moving from a lager, for a long time, the trend was everybody was moving towards ales. I think that was because it was a quicker turnaround for the beer.
Mm,
But we found ways to be innovative with lager. I mean, we had a IPL for a while, an Indian Pale Lager. We've
okay.
played with some ale yeast, and it's just you get up there, and I think once you really understand how to brew and you're confident, I think it's kind of natural. You can stretch out, try different things. We make a spritzer, a wine
Okay.
spritzer, and we did that when everybody went to seltzers. We said, let's go in a different direction,
All right.
um, because it's an opportunity for people that don't necessarily like or can't drink beer, and it's a product that we call it Sabina Straub. So it's a named after her. It's been a hit. People love it. People love
No,
it. So again,
it's
it's
yeah.
it's innovation, but we're small, and so you got to be careful that you're not running to the next best thing. I mean, because seltzers came out and they were really hot, but usually it shakes out that one or two at the top, and a lot of times it just fades away. So it's hard using your innovation, but also it's one thing to make it. It's another thing, can you sell it?
That is a
So
good point.
yeah,
Well, speak of
NAs are another one. I mean, a lot of people are moving towards NAs, and we could probably sell some, but usually in categories like that, there's one or two that are the winners, and they can do it at scale, and so it's innovation, but also knowing when to stay in your lane.
no, I
It's
get that. You want to experiment, but you don't want to stray
right,
too far from what makes you successful. I totally get
right,
that.
and do it well. Do what we
Yeah,
do and do it really well.
that's important. You want
Yeah.
you want the beer to be good. Totally get
You
that.
want the beer
Yes.
to be good. Yeah, and
That's a very
and in
important thing.
today's market, I mean, that's like the price of entry. I mean, if you can't make good beer, you're done.
I totally get
There's
that.
so much good beer out there, and that's part of the problem because it's, people are split, and when Pennsylvania broke the case, we built the business because by law, we could only sell by 24 bottles or cans in a case. That was the minimum you
Mm,
could
yeah.
package and the minimum you could sell. And it wasn't the business model we would have chose, but it's the one that was forced on us. But when that changed, it was really a game changer. We thought 24 was a prime number that couldn't be divided, and we were terribly wrong. Um, but now when people can buy as little as a bottle, they want one of these. They may be a great Straub fan, but they're instead of a case, they're going to get a 6 pack, and then they're going to
Sure.
try this and this and this, and it really was a game changer because the
I,
beer's good.
yeah, I'm guilty of that. I'll do that at the shop and get the 6 pack and get a variety and get a couple different
Right.
things.
Yeah,
Right,
I
it's
mean
nice of
that's
life,
what people do. I mean, it's good for the consumer, but it's also, a testament to how much good beer is available in Pennsylvania.
This is very
That
true. So,
wasn't always true.
no, I totally get that. So, are there any new styles or products that you've launched recently that you're excited about? Anything new coming down the
Um,
road?
we did we put out our Bright a couple of years ago, which is a low carb, low calorie
Okay,
beer,
makes
four
sense. Yeah,
percent
popular.
alcohol. We did the spritzer. We do a lot of one-offs for the tap room.
Okay.
So, right now we just finished a stout and just some that we do that are kind of small batches. The wholesalers in this market are really, they're overwhelmed because, the retailers aren't taking as much beer because people aren't drinking as much. So I
Mm,
think you really got to be careful what you put out there and how much you put out there because I think the system, at the retail level only has the capacity for so many flavors and brands, and I think it's overwhelmed right now. You can get
makes sense.
one of your beers at a bar, and they can go through it in 2 days. But instead of reordering, they got 9 or 10 other brands that they're going to put on before they get back to you. So
Makes
it's
sense.
so we're careful right now with what we're putting out there, and even looking at SKUs. There's too many different packages out there. We're guilty of it too. I mean, everybody, you got 15s, 12, 6 case. For every beer you have, that starts adding up to a lot of packages, and a lot to
I would
keep track
imagine.
of. So for now, we're just focused on those one-offs in the tap room, and just trying to make our beer as good as we can get it. That's not to say we won't. I mean,
Yeah.
I think Vince has an IPA in the lineup somewhere down the line, but yeah,
Okay.
and we've done
I,
different IPAs over the years. That's a good market, but everybody wants to try what's new. So
true.
it's hard to build
Yeah.
loyalty.
I tell you, I'm a bit of an IPA guy, and I'm not gonna lie, I am guilty of that as well. Let me
Yeah.
try this other flavor. I'll circle back eventually. I might be
Yeah.
that guy a little bit.
That's all right, but that's all right. I mean, isn't it great to have choices?
It is. I mean, you go to the stores and there's just so much stuff on the shelves sometimes. I do find myself gravitating back to some certain flavors, though. You do
Right,
want to explore,
right.
but you come home.
Yep.
So, so is there any movements around craft beer and local sourcing? I'd love to know a little bit more about the ingredients, the sustainability,
Yeah.
just more on a macro level about what the
Yeah.
industry's doing.
Well, when I was the chair of the commodities board for probably 5, 6 years, and one of the things we were trying to do is, how can Pennsylvania become a beer state? And so there's a lot of grants to local farmers to do the malted barley and those kinds of things. I mean, with our size, it's hard to source some of those things locally. We've used local hops. I have a cousin who grows hops, and every year we
Hmm.
do either an IPA or a Keller Ale.
Okay.
But it's hard to get the volume that
Hmm.
we need for brewing. But we do things. For example, we were, I don't remember where we were sourcing our packaging from, but I got introduced to a local guy who had a box company, and over the years we were able to convert all of our boxes to his plant, which is 3 miles from the brewery, so St. Mary's Box Company. So
Nice.
that was a good one. And we look for those kinds of things. We still do the returnable bottles,
Hmm.
which is, I think, we're probably one of the few breweries that still does it. Um, so in a way, that's not necessarily sourcing local, but it's
Something.
trying to
Yeah.
conserve glass. I mean, it's hard to believe. I think Peter Straub would probably roll in his grave if he knew you use that bottle once and throw it away. I mean, it's common to us, but when you really think about it,
For them, it
it's
would have
not a
been
good
just
use.
alien.
Right,
Yeah. Like,
right,
what do you mean? Bring it
yeah.
back. Yeah.
So anytime we can, because our market's local. So anytime we can reciprocate, we really try to do that. I mean, I think it's the least you can do. Of course, cost is a factor. There's a lot of different um, determinations as to how and when you can do it. But if we can, it only makes sense. It only makes sense to do it because it's usually your local markets that support you.
Yeah.
So you have to change. And I don't know if it's so much from sustainability, although I think for some people it is important. You want to know how things are sourced. We're lucky because our water supply comes from the Eastern Continental Divide. So that's one of the
Mm,
things about
yeah.
it's never been used. It comes from the reservoir to the brewery, and that's a pretty neat thing that a lot of people, I think that drink our beer like that. They again want to know, where does the water come from? Where do the ingredients come from? So to the best of our ability, we do try to do that, and it
No, the
makes
water
sense.
source. Yeah, the water source thing makes a ton of sense too, because you think about all
Yeah,
these places like these little enclaves of beer brewing that have cropped up over the years, and they're usually centered around a water source. Like I think of Asheville
right,
as a good example. Like they
right,
built that whole
right,
beer district down by
right.
the water. I
Yeah.
mean, got a
When
little,
they talk about what's in the water today, and
yeah.
having a source that's never been treated, you know, and used only once is really an asset that we're lucky and we're happy we have that.
No, that's awesome. So,
Yeah.
if Straub beer, if Straub made a beer that was, inspired by your favorite Pennsylvania food, for example, what would it be called, and what do you think it might taste like? Pennsylvania's got so many local famous
Yeah.
foods. I'm curious. Something's got to complement something there.
Well, we've done a lot of pairings.
Okay.
So one of our things would be we would take, our Straub lager and our amber, and we would pair it with, local sausages or different meats or different dips and sauces and recipes that the local market produces. So I mean, I don't know if I can think of just one, but I think it's a pretty neat process. I mean, they talk about wine and food, but I think the
Yeah.
whole notion of beer and food is just incredible because wine has flavor, but beer can have such a variety of flavors.
Yeah.
And when you build those beer dinners around a menu of beers, it can be a lot of fun. And we do them, they're usually sold out. We usually have a speaker come in and we talk about
Sure.
each course and we talk about the beer and why this beer goes with this food. And it's a pretty neat thing.
Well, if you ever need a guinea pig, I'm at your
Okay,
disposal, sir. Just want to let you know that. Put that
I
out
will
there.
put you on the list.
So one
That
last
would be a fun podcast to
Oh,
do
I'm
to
happy to
do it
make that
during a
one
beer
next
dinner.
season. I'm gonna
Yes.
hold you to that. But any beer go well with Scrapple? Just curious, a
All
good
beer
breakfast
goes
beer.
all beer goes well with Scrapple.
Gotta slip in some Scrapple.
Right. And you can't drink all day if you don't start in the morning.
I agree completely. I mean, you don't get the hangover, you don't stop. It's just
Right,
science.
right, right,
So
right. Well, it's 95% water in most cases.
that you're hydrated. I agree
That's
completely. So
absolutely.
yeah. So from a business perspective, what are some of the biggest challenges and opportunities that Pennsylvania breweries are facing right now?
Well, I think we've been thrown probably since 2012 just an astronomical number of opportunities and hurdles. And I
Okay.
think what's interesting about the hurdles is no brewery created them. I mean, legislative changes, um, the reducing the size of the package. Some of it's been very good for us. Like I said, the breaking the case. I mean, those are all
Hmm.
major shifts. It took us a long time to catch up to because we didn't have the equipment because we only sold in Pennsylvania. So why would we make a 12 pack or why would we make an 18 pack when you couldn't sell it? Um, I think today the issue is, we had COVID, which I think helped retail for most breweries, but it killed the bar business. So I think that
Yeah.
was probably a net loss overall. Um, and I think today we post COVID, you had the inflation, people are still recovering. I mean, it was not just 1 or 2 points. I mean, you were talking about some of your raw materials going up 20-25%, and that's really not something you can pass on to your consumers. Um, and then on top of that, now I think we have a oversupply of beer, and that's a problem because if demand was static or even growing, that would help. But actually demand's declining. And
Hmm.
and it's declining for probably a dozen different reasons. You have people that are dying, no longer drinking beer. I had a wholesaler, I called him, he was down I don't know, it was like 25% on a certain package, a keg. And I said, what happened? And he said, well, three people died, and they
Hmm.
were all good for a keg every week or two. So, so
Yeah.
there's that. I think people are still drinking beer, but you're also competing with wine and spirits, and you're competing with, some of the seltzers, the
Seltzer's a big
ciders,
one. Yeah.
you got medical marijuana now.
Yeah.
Um, and then you have the people that are just drinking less. And that
Yeah.
that's a conundrum for breweries because you really can't go out and say drink more.
I know. Yeah.
It's better for society that they, these are changing, and so demand is declining in so many different ways, and or from so many different sources that it's really hard, I think, to get a grip on it. And I think the number of breweries, I mean, I think the tap room model is awesome, but I think, it can only be replicated so many times. And, there's a finite number of people that go to tap rooms, and they can only go so often. And if there's more
True.
tap rooms, they're probably going to fit. So there's just all kinds of things, socioeconomic things going on in the world that I think is going to have it's going to force us to change the way we do it. Now we're lucky because of Straub and who we are. We have a demographic that goes from 21 forever. We
Yeah.
have the redhead ladies come to our tap room for lunch, and we have, and everybody's welcome. And so we're lucky in that we have a diverse demographic. Um, but I think that challenge is real. We just lost a brewery close by not too long ago. Great beer, great service, and it's like there's nothing they can do. You get to a point, and it's so I think that's going to be the reality. And I don't see demand changing. I think through 2030, you're going to see it continue to go down, and we'll just have to see, what kind of innovation breweries can do to keep it going. But it's a hard time in the industry. I mean, I think kind of a wake up. It's kind of amazing breweries are still opening, but if you've had a dream all your life, maybe
Yeah.
they'll figure it out and be able to hit the home run. But you got to make good beer. You got to have good service. I think you've got to advertise in a way that's not shocking but inviting. And you got to play on your strength. I mean, for us, our heritage and legacy is our point of difference, and there's people out there that just love that, and we just have to keep finding the people that are attracted to that, and we'll push through.
No, you touched on a bunch of stuff there. I mean, just the whole change in society around like third spaces and obviously
Right,
consumption of alcohol in general is
right,
obviously a conversation that talked about all the time. And I
right,
don't know, I'm of the
right.
opinion I think we should have more spaces and people, I'm not saying anyone should be doing
I
things
tend to agree with
unhealthy,
you.
but like,
Yeah,
yeah, have a few beers, get loose with your friends a little bit, have fun.
right,
Like,
right,
hey, we could
right.
use more of that in society
Well,
in
I think you
general.
could. I mean, but I also think it's a reality, and I think that, there's ways around it. I mean, I think the industry puts so much beer out there so quickly. I mean, we can have the nicest display, our nicest display anywhere in the state, and you go into these big wholesalers, and everything is diminished because there's so much.
So much.
Nothing stands out, and so that's going to be a problem to figure out. How do you advertise? Where do you put your money? How do you get people to know you're there? And how do you get them to, even if they know you're there, how do you get them to come back? And we'll figure it out. But it's an interesting. It's kind of a self-inflicted wound in a lot of ways. Because of the number of breweries and because of
Mm,
the production and the number of packages, but everybody was trying to survive and do the right thing, and retailers the same way. So we'll see.
yeah.
It's going to be interesting.
No, I'm
Yeah.
I'm curious to see myself. As a consumer of beer, I am very curious to see how that shakes out. So,
Yeah.
so we've talked about other breweries a little bit. You talked about the one that closed down the street, but I'm curious, do you collaborate with any other brewers in the region? Is community and brewing, how does that work with you guys? Are you just all
Yeah.
in
I mean,
competition? You collaborate?
yeah. Anytime we can. I mean, I got a lot of breweries will put our beer on tap because they don't have like a lager that's sessionable beer. But I would say yes, yes, yes. I mean, it's a small community, and even though, August Shell had an article when I think it was Leinenkugel closed, but I mean, just
Mm,
he described it as that we're now in this bitter, bitter competition and fight with some of your best friends, and that's what beer is. But with that said, you do anything you can to help another brewer. I mean, we have somebody come up, they need a pasteurizer. We'll let them run it through a pasteurizer. I mean, anytime we can help another brewery, we do. And I think anytime they can help us, they do, because it's a tight fit. I mean, Yingling's helped us over the years. I mean, we've done things. We haven't done a lot of collaboration brews, but maybe we would down the line. I don't know if that kind of has passed, but yeah, it's interesting because it's fierce competition right now. But yet that camaraderie and that willingness to help and partner and do things is still there, and it's still strong, which I think really makes our industry different. We're still all small compared to the big guys. I mean, even when you
sure.
think about Yingling, they're huge compared to Straub, but not compared to InBev or Miller
Oh
or
God, yeah,
those
no.
other ones. And people forget that. I mean,
Yeah,
they're in a really challenging spot. They make great beer, but they're relatively small. They're
yeah,
probably closer in size to Straub than they are to InBev. So anything
definitely.
you can do to help those another fellow brewer succeed, you want to do.
That makes sense. So, yeah,
That
building that
Yeah,
sense of
it's
community,
kind
I
of
think.
nice, right? You get to do the
Yeah,
right things for the right reasons, and you're competing, and it's fierce, but you can still do the right thing.
nothing wrong with a little healthy, friendly competition, you
No,
know?
no.
So, if you could have a beer with any historical figure, brewer or otherwise, what would it be and what would you be pouring for this guy?
I thought about that, and there's a lot of people you think about, you'd love to sit down and have a conversation with, but again, it would probably have to come back to my great great grandfather Peter Straub, and I would just love for him to come to our campus and just look around and talk about where we are and how do we get there and how does that line up with what he was thinking 153 years ago. I think that would be fascinating. I haven't tried the different beers. Just I would love to have that conversation.
I'd love to see him try a seltzer or one of these ciders that people are drinking nowadays, just to see what he was like. What is this thing?
Yeah.
What is this
What
bubbly
is this
water you're giving me?
crunchy water?
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
And back then they made we made a lot of different beers, but I think for a while I think most breweries made a beer, one beer, and that's
Okay,
what they made.
one at a
And
time.
it's
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, it
yeah,
makes sense. Yeah,
it's we have an 18 a beer we call 1872, which is our pre-prohibition lager, which is as close as we can figure as they would have made it um before the prohibition. Because
okay.
after prohibition they regulated everything. I mean, they
Yeah,
regulated how much alcohol, ingredients, but before that, so in a way, before prohibition you had a lot more probably variety of beers with bigger, bolder flavors, higher
sure.
alcohol. And then you had from the prohibition probably to the 80s where it was pretty much one kind
Mm.
of beer. And then we're back to these many, many different varieties.
And my dad has mentioned that. It's like, yeah, for a long time it was just all these stuff on the shelf, and now all you kids drinking all these IPAs. I
Yeah,
don't.
yeah.
But,
Well, and
yeah,
I think the only difference was the yeast they use. I mean, I think
interesting.
that's what gave the American lager, each American lager, a slightly different flavor was the yeast, and I guess whether they use corn or rice could make a
Mm,
difference as well.
the malt, it
So
makes sense. So that recipe, did you guys have to do some homework on that? Was it just written down in the family
yeah,
Bible? Like, how did you guys do that?
Vince found something. He found something that he's never come clean with me on it completely, but but it's a really good beer, a
I
really good
believe it.
beer. Yeah,
So you've been doing this a long time. It's a family business. I'm curious, what keeps you
yeah.
passionate about brewing all these years? What's the most rewarding
Ah,
part of your job?
I think how we engage with the community of St. Mary's, seeing our customers. Every day when I drive out and I see the tap room and I see people down there, and sometimes with their kids or dogs or whatever, just having the time of their life. I think the employees, nothing would happen without them, obviously.
Sure.
So I think it's just, the legacy, reminding myself that this is just not any job. It's an important job. So I don't think there's one question. I think there's a lot of different things that motivate me. I mean, I think it's, in a way it's family. And so it's not easy work, but there's something really satisfying knowing that this is my family's business, and that it's, I've got hundreds of cousins and, just, I'm fifth generation. So it's kind of an honor to be able to do it. I'm sure there's times they'd probably want somebody else in here, but you do the best you can. You really and you respect it, and that's the most important thing. You never take advantage of it. So I think all those things combined, and I work at a brewery. That's very cool. You get to go up and you can smell when they're brewing, and it almost makes you hungry because it's like, it just smells like a great oatmeal in the morning, and it's fun. It's a great business to be in. The people are great, and you get to engage with the public. So yeah, it's a whole bunch of reasons to give you that job satisfaction.
That's amazing. Well, my last question of the day, I'd love to zoom out here a little bit and kind of get our crystal ball and look into the future a little bit. What is the next 5, 10, 20 years of brewing in Pennsylvania, do you think? What do you think it's going to look like?
Um, well, I don't know what's going to happen on the wholesale retail side. I think it's shifting. I mean, I think, when wholesalers were, when they went into grocery stores and convenience stores, I mean, it took up a lot of resources. And I don't think the net gain was there. So it cost them a lot of money to be able to do that. So I think for us and for others, you're never going to ban it wholesale. I mean, people are always going to be buying beer, but it's changing. And I think we're going to have to really just shift more focus on retail, the direct to the customer, and what can we do? I mean, beer centric always, um, but things that use the brand and the brand strength and get out there and just get Straub directly to the customer. I mean, the wholesale network, we have great wholesalers and we have great retailers, but they sell your beer. The touch point
Yeah.
is at the retail level. And I think we're going to probably be forced just to, do more of that, continue with our wholesale network, but we have to figure out where that's going to go and what that's going to look like. But I think do a pivot and really try to go direct to consumers, not necessarily just with the beer, but what are the beer centric things we can do related to beer tourism, related to who we are, and so it'll be interesting to see how that turns out. But I think the days where you're selling almost everything through your wholesale and retail network, I think those are changing. And it's really, like I said, it's not the fault of wholesalers. It's not even the fault of retailers. I mean, it's just if the consumer isn't asking for, more of this or more of that, there's no way the retailer can take it. And there's no way the wholesaler can deliver it. So, I mean, I think we just all have to rethink the models, and probably the days of rapid growth are probably going to be gone for a while. I mean, I think anybody with expectations of because there's so much good beer,
Sure.
I don't think one beer anymore is going to catch the market. I think for breweries like Yingling, they're big enough that they can go into other states, but that's very expensive. I mean, probably beyond what we would want to do and sustain. So I think there's a bright future, but you just have to be strategic and innovative, and like we've been for 153 years, read the market, pivot, and continue to just be all about Straub and do what you do well.
It's amazing. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show today. This was a
Sure.
really fun and insightful conversation. Big thank you to William Brock from Straub Brewing for joining us and sharing the story behind one of Pennsylvania's most iconic beer brands. If you'd like to learn more about Straub, its history, or plan a visit to the Eternal Tap, head to straubbeer.com. Thank you for tuning in to Shelf Confidence. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, share, and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time, I'm John Zimmerman, and this is Shelf Confidence.